I am here to speak to you today about Cassidy and Eagle's claim that charter schools are a harmful choice for public education. She supported her claims by stating that A, public schools are profit education, B, charter school teachers are less experienced, and C, that charter schools underperform compared to traditional public schools. To refute this, I would first like to refute her definition of a charter school. Her definition was that charter schools are publicly funded but privately ran by a charter. However, she forgot a very important part about charter schools, in which that charter schools are indeed publicly funded and they are indeed privately ran by a charter, but they are also catered to a specialized population with specific interests. What this means is that one charter school can be specialized in arts, literature, etc., while another school can be more focused on math and science. With this very specific definition, it can alter her arguments or invalidate them completely. So first I would like to go to her first point, that charter schools are a profit education. The fact that charter schools are a profit education does not mean that they are bad. Her sub-points was that charter schools are given tax money so that they can contract it to for-profit organizations, but subcontracting it to other organizations does not mean or prove that charter schools are bad. It gives no comparison that it is a harmful choice for public education. She has also stated that Chicago International Charter Schools subcontract the operations of their schools to Charter School USA, which is a for-profit educational management company, but gave no reason as to why that would be a harmful choice for education. All she has done is merely stated that it does contract it. If a company is also for profit, but that does not mean that the products that they create are necessarily bad. Just because something is for profit or is contracted does not mean that it is a harmful product or any neglectable product. Her second point was that, or her second sub-point was that their money is not decided by the government. It is how it is. The charter school has power over how it is spent. And she has stated an article in the Los Angeles Times that reported two operators misusing their money and then taking $200,000 of public funds. However, she is using generalization to say that just because one administration used their money incorrectly, all charter schools use their money incorrectly. If by her logic, I also have an article from the New York Times that said a couple teachers in Atlanta changed their student test scores, thereby directly harming public education by skewing test scores and rankings of schools for their own profits and benefits. Just because this one group of teachers skewed their data and used students' test scores for their own benefits does not mean that all schools do the same. Likewise, just because one charter school administration took money does not mean that all charter schools take money or misuse their money. Her second claim was that charter schools teachers are less experienced. And to refute this, I say that just because a teacher is not certified does not mean that they are any less qualified to teach. She stated that only 75% of teachers are required to be certified. However, a teacher who is not certified can be just as effective as one who is certified. Her secondary subpoint was the high turnover rate of teachers in these schools. However, the high teacher turnover rate has no correlation to the fact that these teachers are any less experienced, which was her second subpoint. Therefore, it invalidates the argument. However, she has also, on top of that, she said that she said that the charter schools can replace half of their staff, which is true. However, in this particular point, this can actually go against our argument, because if a charter school has around 75% of teachers who are only certified, and they get rid of half and bring in more experienced teachers, then that charter school has even more experienced teachers, which defeats the claim that charter schools have less experienced teachers. She has also claimed, without any evidence, that these constant turnover of teachers lead to an instability of teachers and students feeling constantly misunderstood and under-evaluated. However, from her own sources, from Take Part, she has an article that said that a group of parents have stated that the smaller amount of staff allow them to be closer to students at a private level and become more engaged, which goes against her argument from her very own source. Her third argument is that her third secondary claim is that charter schools underperform compared to traditional public schools. However, this is to be expected if you redefine the definition of a public or of a charter school. Since charter schools have specific cater to specific interests, if a couple of charter schools are more interested in theater or art, then they will generally, obviously, have lower scores in math and science. On the other hand, some other schools might be more geared towards science or more geared towards math, raising their scores. However, this instability obviously is what leads to some charter schools underperforming in math and science. One study she states is a study by Stanford University that reported that 37% of charter schools did worse than regular public schools. Well, this is to be expected in terms of math or English, because some charter schools, and not all, but some charter schools from which this data could have pulled the data from, could have resulted in charter schools that were more geared toward theater or English and not specifically the requirements that a public school would have. Since they have different standards, of course, it would be reasonable to say that a couple of charter schools would do worse than several public schools. Another statistic that she said is the Department of Education reported a charter school where only 11% of students achieved proficiency in reading and 23% achieved proficiency in math. However, this is again generalization in the fact that just because one charter school did this poorly does not mean another charter school would do this poorly as well. In fact, article in KPSB has stated that another charter school in San Diego scored the highest on state tests in English, but just because that one charter school did so well in English does not mean that every other charter school is that good at English. This statistics also undermine on the fact that that charter school could have been geared more towards literature or theater or art, and therefore would not have put so much emphasis on English or math. Her last sub-point to the secondary claim is that there's a lack of advanced placement classes. But on that, parents are also aware of this issue. And if they send their students to a charter school with specific interests geared towards, say, science, then these AP classes are not technically necessary, since they'll be already learning the skills beforehand and being able to apply it to whatever specific job or college that they're interested in. Therefore, the lack of advanced placement classes does not really affect the charter schools. Thank you for listening to my refutation.
Okay, well, you preview everything clearly. You signpost as you're going along. I think you've got a good argument at the beginning suggesting that the definition that the advocate's using has left out an important consideration. But once you present that definition, you don't follow up with any information to explain it or demonstrate that it, in fact, has made a difference. Is there satisfaction between students and parents whose kids go to these specialized schools that do these particular kinds of things? Is their performance enhanced in theater or art or in math or in science in comparison to the traditional schools? We don't get any of that kind of comparative data. I do think that your argument on the first point, basically you make a good counterclaim on that. I thought that you had a good challenge to the reasoning that the advocate presented. I think you needed some data of your own to show, for instance, that there might be advantages to having a profit motive. They're more careful about how they spend their funds. They are going to more likely maybe choose things that are effective, that have been tested well. I don't know what kinds of arguments could be made in favor of that, but you generally don't make any. You just argue that there's no demonstration from the other side that there's any problem with having a profit motive, and I think that's okay. I think one of the things, though, that you ought to be arguing is that there is a motive on the part of the public schools to, especially the public school teachers unions, to address this. They're concerned about the amount of money that's being spent. There's, unions generally oppose these sorts of things because the teachers are not hired in the same way. They don't have the same kinds of requirements, and so they see that as being threatening. So maybe there's bias in the other point of view. If you're going to defend the argument, you might as well make the attack the same way that the advocate made the attack. On the second point, where you talked about how the money was misspent or not misspent, I thought that you did a good job presenting an analogy here to show that we can't really reach the conclusion that the advocate's talking about. It's a singular case where something bad happened with the charter school money, but there are plenty of singular cases where bad things happen in public education, and we don't judge the public education based on that. I thought that was a reasonable approach there. On the third point, I guess it's actually the second point you're getting to it, is about the experience. Now, you say that they don't need to be certified. That doesn't change their teaching ability. I got no evidence on that particular point. I think you do legitimately point out that the advocate didn't show that there is any significant reason why that matters. That's okay. But I think you need to explain your point a little bit more. Your math there, I could not figure out what you were talking about. 75%, if they fired half of them, that means that the remaining are going to be more. I don't know how you got to that conclusion. It's not very clearly explained. It was just confusing. On the issue of underperforming, we're back to basically repeating the argument that you had prior to the main argument, and then another argument about whether or not it's a legitimate generalization that's being presented here. Those are good presses on that. I think you could have used some evidence to support those particular points. A couple of things about presentation. You're 3 minutes and 41 seconds overtime, so that's a pretty substantial overtime. That will not happen in the debates. I'll just cut you off when we're doing the debates, so let's get ready for that. And, it's a small room. You don't have to shout. Okay, thank you.